The air in the Senate hearing room at the Washington Capitol was a physical entity, thick and suffocatingly intense. Every breath taken felt heavy, charged with an unspoken anticipation that hummed beneath the polished marble and hushed whispers. This wasn't just another routine accountability session for the administration. Everyone in that solemn, typically cold space sensed it. Cameras, poised like predators, were ready to record, their red lights blinking, spotlights illuminating the stage for what was clearly about to become a heated showdown. In the eye of this brewing storm sat Karoline Leavitt, White House Press Secretary. Young, yes, but her posture was upright, her eyes sharp and utterly confident. She represented President Donald Trump's administration with a steadfast calm that belied the immense pressure. She was there, not just as a figurehead, but as a sentinel of truth, though few in that room understood the depth of her resolve. Across the expansive table, Senator Adam Schiff leaned back in his chair, a sly, almost condescending smile playing. On his lips, his confidence was palpable, an arrogance that suggested he held all the cards, that he was merely gearing up to launch his verbal daggers. The room, largely filled with his allies and the ever-present media, seemed to hold its breath, waiting for the performance to begin. "Ladies and gentlemen," Schiff began, his voice dripping with a mocking, challenging tone that sliced through. "The quiet. How does it feel to be a young press secretary, constantly parroting President Trump's words like a hired spokesperson?" A few nervous chuckles rippled through the room, immediately ratcheting up the tension. The microphones caught every rustle, every murmur. Leavitt didn't flinch. Not a muscle twitched. Not a flicker of emotion crossed her face. The cameras zoomed in, hungry to capture any sign of weakness, any hint of a break in her composure. Silence descended heavy and absolute, blanketing the room. Schiff, emboldened by the lack of immediate reaction, leaned forward, his tone now saturated with outright sarcasm. "Miss Leavitt, do you even understand what you're doing here, or are you just a young girl trying to defend Trump?" The room held its breath, the collective tension almost unbearable. Still, Leavitt remained composed. She blinked slowly, her gaze unwavering as it locked onto Schiff's. Her lips twitched, just barely, and though she hadn't spoken a word, everyone sensed something monumental was coming. Schiff, oblivious to the shift in the atmosphere, smirked smugly, convinced he had already won. "Miss Leavitt," he continued, his voice thick with arrogance, "perhaps if you spent less time posting on social media and more time learning the responsibilities of a press secretary, you'd know how to answer here." Laughter from a few senators echoed in the marble-lined room, a cruel, dismissive sound. Reporters scribbled furiously, their pens scratching against paper. The cameras zoomed in again, ensuring no expression, no subtle movement would be missed. Leavitt glanced briefly at the observation area where President Trump sat, his face expressionless, Secret Service agents motionless behind him. First Lady Melania Trump, seated beside her husband, watched Leavitt with subtle admiration, a hint of something deeper in her gaze. Leavitt didn't blink. She slowly turned to the audience, her voice, when it came, sharp but perfectly calm. I came here today to talk about the truth," Leavitt said firmly, "but it seems some people here wouldn't recognize the truth, even if it stood right in front of them." Her words, delivered with quiet conviction, silenced the room for a moment. Schiff, his smirk unwavering, glared back. "The truth from you? Please go ahead, Leavitt." He scoffed, inviting her to speak, unaware of the trap he was setting for himself. Little did he know, he was about to get far more truth than he bargained for. Before you dive deeper into this explosive story and witness the truth unfold, take a moment to comment below where you're watching from. And don't forget to subscribe and like this video so you won't miss the latest, most impactful stories that are shaking America. Your support helps us bring these crucial moments to light. Karoline Leavitt offered a slight, almost imperceptible smile. It wasn't a smile of amusement, but rather one of quiet certainty, a serene prelude to an imminent, earth-shattering moment. Her hand moved deliberately, reaching for a document from the stack in front of her. It was a thick sheet bearing an official seal, its weight seemingly insignificant, yet about to cause a seismic shift in the grand hall. "I wasn't planning to bring this up," she said softly, her voice pointed, cutting through Schiff's sneering invitation. "But since we're talking about the truth," she slid the paper forward, her eyes, now cold and resolute, locked onto Schiff. Every eye in the room, from the farthest reporter to the closest senator, turned to Leavitt. The cameras, with their insatiable hunger for drama, followed suit, zooming in tighter than ever before. Senators leaned forward, their casual postures evaporating into rigid anticipation. Schiff's smirk, which had been so confidently etched on his face moments ago, froze. Leavitt tapped the document lightly with her finger, a sharp, almost percussive sound in the suddenly absolute silence. Then she spoke, her voice clear and cutting, like a sharp blade slicing through the suffocating air. "Senator Schiff, you can mock my youth, but your name is in a federal investigation report regarding $12 million in misused COVID relief funds." The hearing room in the Capitol shook. It wasn't a physical tremor, but a visceral jolt that resonated through every person present, as if Karoline Leavitt's words had created a sudden, impossible vacuum. From the observation area, Melania Trump leaned forward, a whispered exclamation escaping her lips. She actually did it. Adam Schiff, who moments before had been radiating arrogant confidence, sank back into his chair, his jaw slack. He scrambled for a response, his mouth opening and closing, but no sound, no coherent word came out. He was, for the first time, utterly speechless. Everyone in the room now saw what Leavitt saw. The truth, stark and undeniable. And all of America was about to witness it. Chaos was the only word to describe the atmosphere that instantly erupted. The committee chairman pounded the gavel, shouting, "Order! Order in the room!" But his voice was drowned out by the sudden explosion of murmurs, gasps, and frantic movement. Leavitt's words lingered in the air like smoke after a fire, their impact undeniable. Schiff's face twitched uncontrollably. His lips moved, but still no words emerged, only desperate guttural sounds. His hands, visible to the watchful cameras, trembled violently. Reporters scrambled to take notes, their pens scratching furiously, their movements mirroring the internal turmoil of the room. Phones buzzed non-stop, breaking news alerts spreading nationwide at lightning speed. Karoline Leavitt exposes Schiff in live hearing. Senator Ellen Harper whispered to a colleague, her voice laced with disbelief, "What did she just do?" Senator Michael Tran, stunned, could only reply, "She did it." Leavitt stood firm, confident, holding the document aloft for all to see. "This document isn't just evidence," she declared, her voice cutting through the din, regaining control of the room. "It's a mirror. For every American watching, this is what happens when leaders mock instead of serve, when they think no one is watching." The eyes of a young aide from Virginia, who had always admired Leavitt, welled up with tears. Suddenly, Schiff shot to his feet, his face flushed with a desperate fury. "This is a fabrication, sheer desperation," he shouted, his voice cracking with rage. "You're trying to save face because you're just—" Leavitt cut him off, her voice soft but firm, a stark contrast to his bluster. "No, Senator Schiff, I'm just speaking the truth, something you haven't done in a long time." The room buzzed with murmurs again, but this time they were different, not shocked, but affirming. This wasn't just a moment, it was a turning point. The storm, she knew, was just beginning. The cameras kept rolling, millions watching via CNN, Fox, Newsmax, and even international channels, all switching to live coverage. Schiff reached for his water glass, his hand trembling so violently that the glass rattled against the table. "I demand a recess!" he yelled, his voice cracking with genuine panic. The truth, finally spoken, had him cornered. Schiff, his face a mask of rapidly disintegrating control, yelled for a recess, his voice cracking with the strain of his crumbling facade. But Karoline Leavitt didn't sit down. She remained standing, a quiet sentinel of conviction. With deliberate grace, she opened her folder, her movements unhurried, pulling out yet another document. The first revelation had been a punch. This was about to be a surgical strike to the heart of the scandal. "This isn't just your name, Senator Schiff," she stated, her voice cutting through the lingering tension. "These are bank transfer receipts, relief funds meant for small businesses during the pandemic, but you funneled them into offshore shell accounts." Gasps, sharper and more widespread than before, echoed through the chamber. A reporter, caught off guard, dropped their microphone, the thud resonating like a solemn drumbeat. A senator covered their face, head bowed in visible shame. From the observation area, Melania Trump whispered, a fierce admiration in her tone. "She's not stopping." President Trump sat motionless, his gaze cold, almost as if he had been waiting for this moment all along, for someone to finally pull back the curtain. Schiff looked around, his face ashen, searching for an escape, a denial. "I didn't know about that money," he stammered, a pathetic, desperate lie. Leavitt's voice was almost gentle now, a quiet force that carried far more weight than any shouted accusation. "You knew. You signed the papers. You hired family members to run the shell company." She paused, then turned her gaze directly to the cameras, addressing millions beyond the hearing room. "I didn't want to expose this here, but when you mocked me in front of all of America, you mocked every American who still believes in honesty." Schiff slumped into his chair as if struck down, his arrogance utterly shattered. This was no longer just a hearing, this was a reckoning. Across the vast landscape of America, the truth resonated with agonizing clarity. In Virginia, a mother of 3 who had lost her job during the pandemic wiped away tears as she watched Leavitt speak, a silent acknowledgement of her own buried pain. In an Oregon hospital break room, a weary nurse paused mid-feeding a patient, instinctively turning up the TV volume. In a small Nebraska diner, the air went still, the clatter of plates ceasing. Grown men, usually stoic, stared at the screen, choking with emotion, a collective recognition washing over them. In the hearing room, Leavitt continued, her voice gaining a quiet power that commanded absolute attention. "You didn't steal from billionaires, Senator Schiff. You stole from single mothers, from veterans, from people who still had hope." Schiff tried to stand, but his knees shook uncontrollably. An aide rushed to support him, his face a picture of panic. Leavitt stepped forward, not as a politician, but as a young woman representing millions of Americans, her posture embodying their collective suffering and renewed courage. "I'm not saying this to hurt you," she said, her voice clear and resonant. "I'm saying it because the truth still matters. You tried to humiliate me, but you only reminded me who I'm fighting for." A single tear rolled down Leavitt's cheek, a testament not to weakness, but to the profound empathy she felt for those who had been wronged. That moment broke the room. Even Senator Daniel Brooks, a man known for his skepticism, wiped his eyes. All of America, watching through their screens, was not just shocked by the scandal, but by the raw courage they thought had vanished from their leaders. The news spread like wildfire, a conflagration of truth. Within minutes, the clip of Leavitt exposing Schiff went viral on social media. Reporters swarmed outside the Capitol steps, shouting questions into the humid Washington air. Inside, Leavitt sat back down, calm amid the storm that had just passed. Though an undercurrent still simmered, she whispered to her aide, a quiet confession. "I wasn't trying to win. I just wanted the truth to be spoken." From the observation area, President Trump leaned toward Melania, his voice low, filled with a newfound respect. "Honey, that's what a real leader looks like. She doesn't shout, she stands firm." On the hearing floor, Schiff refused to speak, his face pale and unresponsive. His aides whispered frantically, sweating, their phones buzzing incessantly with messages from lawyers, donors, and panicking allies. Leavitt didn't smile. Her heart was heavy. She knew this wasn't just politics anymore. It was about real people's lives. In the hallway, a janitor, an elderly Vietnam veteran named Samuel, stopped her. He stepped forward and gently shook Leavitt's hand. "You did what I fought for in Vietnam," he said, his eyes misty. "Yes, Missy, you spoke the truth when it was hardest." Leavitt, the young press secretary, quietly nodded, her eyes acknowledging the silent understanding between them. Because this wasn't about praise, it was about waking up America. At her office, Karoline Leavitt's phone buzzed non-stop, the digital symphony of a nation awakening. Calls came from governors, senators, pastors, and factory workers, from mothers in quiet suburban homes to the clamor of bustling city halls. One call in particular resonated deeply, from a teacher in a small Idaho town. "I showed my students your clip," the teacher said, her voice trembling with emotion. One of them actually cried, Miss Leavitt, saying they finally saw someone stand up for people like their dad, who lost his job and never got relief funds. Leavitt's eyes blurred, a silent acknowledgement of the raw, untainted hope in that young voice. She turned to her aide, her resolve solidifying. "Get in touch with the Justice Department. I want them to open an investigation. Schiff's actions hurt real families. They deserve justice." Her aide hesitated, a furrow of concern on his brow. "Ma'am, this will start a war in Congress." Leavitt stood tall, resolute. "Then let it come." Outside, Schiff, a pale, trembling figure, tried to leave the hearing room, but was immediately swarmed by a ravenous pack of reporters. "Do you deny the evidence? Did you misuse relief funds?" they shouted, their questions like daggers. Schiff snapped, "No comment," but the panic in his voice, the wild desperation in his eyes, said it all. Inside, senators slowly filed out, their faces grim, but a young Congresswoman, Hannah Coleman, lingered. Her eyes were red. She approached Leavitt, her voice thick with emotion. "My father was a truck driver," she said, her voice breaking. "He died during the pandemic. His company got no relief. You just answered the question I've carried for 3 years." Leavitt said nothing, only opened her arms. Coleman collapsed into her embrace, sobbing. The unspoken weight of years of unanswered questions finally finding a voice. That night, as Washington buzzed with the aftermath, Leavitt returned to her quiet office. On her desk, a handwritten envelope with no return address stood out. She opened it slowly. "Dear Miss Leavitt," it read in a child's uncertain script. "My name is Emma. I'm 10. My mom cried watching you on TV. She said you made her believe again. My dad used to say, 'No one in Washington cares, but I think you do.' Thank you for making my mom smile. She hasn't smiled in so long." Leavitt folded the letter, pressing it to her chest, deeply moved. She thought of the people in small towns, the shuttered factories, the forgotten voices. This was never about power. It was about people like Emma and her mom. She turned on the TV. Schiff was on, denying everything, calling the documents fake, a smear campaign. But this time, America didn't believe him. Leavitt whispered, "I didn't break the system. I just held up a mirror." Outside, crowds gathered, not to divide, but to hope. They waved flags, held signs saying, "Thank you, Karoline." America was moved deeply. As dusk fell over Washington, church bells rang from a small chapel near the Capitol. Inside, a few people gathered, not to pray, but to reflect. On the screen, Leavitt's words played again. An older man, Jacob, A former Montana miner watched, leaning on his cane. His relief funds had vanished during the pandemic, while politicians argued. Hearing Leavitt speak the truth, he broke down. "I thought no one would speak for people like us anymore," he choked out. Karoline Leavitt sat in her dim Capitol office, reviewing documents, ensuring no detail was exaggerated or wrong. Her phone buzzed. President Trump. "You okay, Karoline?" he asked, his voice rough. "Yes, Mr. President," she replied, her voice steady. "I didn't mean to go that far." Trump chuckled. "That's exactly why it worked." A pause, then he added, "Get ready. They'll come for you now." Leavitt looked out the window at the growing crowd below. "I know," she said, unafraid. The next morning, Leavitt's image was everywhere, not in attack ads, but on homemade posters, digital billboards, and posts by mothers online. A Nevada mom wrote, "My son asked what honesty looks like. I showed him Karoline Leavitt's clip." Her quote spread like wildfire. "Senator Schiff, you can mock my youth, but your name is in a federal investigation report regarding $12 million in misused COVID relief funds." High schoolers quoted it. In Alabama, barbershops, and California, boardrooms, Leavitt's courage was the talk of the nation, but in Capitol offices, panic spread like a virus. Schiff's team was in disarray. Lawyers swarmed, allies quietly pulled back. Leavitt's chief aide walked in, eyes wide. "Ma'am, the Oversight Committee just called an emergency session. They want you there." Leavitt nodded. "Then we go." The aide warned, "Schiff might retaliate." Leavitt replied, voice firm, "I'm not afraid of that. I'm afraid of what happens if we stop telling the truth." Then her mother called. "The kids saw you on TV," she whispered, voice trembling. "They said you looked like a superhero." Leavitt's hand shook, not from fear, but from the immense weight of her responsibility. The truth wasn't just about Schiff anymore. It was about every American who felt silenced. Outside the Capitol, the protesting crowd grew. But this wasn't a typical protest. No shouting, no angry signs, just faces, tears, and an overwhelming sense of hope. A woman named Sarah from Wisconsin held a photo of her husband and 2 kids. She'd driven all night just to be there. She approached a Capitol staffer. "Please give this letter to Miss Leavitt." En route to the Oversight Committee room, a security guard handed Leavitt the letter. She opened it. "My husband died after our small business was denied emergency relief. Later we learned the money went to shell companies. Today, you showed me justice still exists in this country. Thank you. You changed our lives." Leavitt stood still, deeply affected. Her aide whispered, "Ma'am, they're waiting." She wiped her eyes and walked in. The Oversight Committee room was tense. Schiff sat at the far end, pale, rigid. Cameras rolled. Leavitt took her seat. No script, no prepared speech, just her and a nation watching. Outside, Sarah blended into the crowd of strangers, crying, not from pain, but from something deeper. Hope. The room quieted as Leavitt sat down. Cameras clicked. The nation held its breath. Schiff didn't look at her, his fingers tapping nervously on the table. The committee chair, Senator Margaret Evans, cleared her throat. "Miss Leavitt, before we begin, would you like to make a statement?" Leavitt stood slowly. No podium, no cards, just her hands clasped in front of her. "I didn't come here for drama," she said softly. "I didn't come to play politics. I came because the American people deserve to know someone sees them." She paused, looking directly at Schiff. "We sit here because people entrusted us with their pain, their taxes, their dreams. But when that money was stolen, their dreams turned to debt and no one answered them." She held up Sarah's letter. "This woman isn't asking for revenge. She just wants the truth. I owe her that. We all do." Some committee members bowed their heads ashamed. Senator Laura Mitchell, a longtime ally of Adam Schiff, leaned forward, her voice challenging. "Miss Leavitt, are you implying criminal allegations?" Karoline Leavitt didn't flinch. "I'm not implying," she replied, her voice sharp. "I'm submitting evidence." She raised a thick red folder, carefully sealed. Inside are documents, timestamps, transfer records, and sworn testimony from Schiff's former staff. Evidence that he funneled emergency relief funds into shell organizations controlled by his own family. The room erupted in gasps. Cameras zoomed in. Schiff's mouth opened, but no words came out. Leavitt continued, her voice calm. "This isn't personal. It's the truth. If we ignore it, we tell every struggling American that corruption wins." Senator Michael Tran wiped his eyes, visibly moved. Leavitt turned to the observation area. "I know this might cost me dearly, but I didn't become press secretary to make friends. I did it so people like Sarah, like Emma, like everyone in forgotten small towns are finally heard." The room fell silent. For the first time in decades, the Senate hearing room carried a sacred weight. Leavitt stood there, not as a politician, but as a patriot, and America through their screens was awash in tears. Schiff suddenly shot up, his face flushed, trembling with a rage born of desperation. "This is a smear campaign," he shouted, his voice hoarse. "All lies, no legal weight." Karoline Leavitt didn't respond. She just quietly, deliberately handed the thick red folder to the committee chair, Senator Margaret Evans. Evans looked down at the damning contents, her expression grim, then slowly passed it to the committee clerk. "I propose a formal investigation," she said, her voice grave, the weight of the moment settling over the room. "I second," Senator Emily Carter called out, her voice firm. Schiff's chair creaked as he sank back, his defiance crumbling. "This is a witch hunt," he yelled, his voice thin with panic. "You're all insane." Leavitt calmly turned to him, her gaze unwavering. "No, Senator Schiff, this is justice." Reporters surged forward as Schiff bolted from the room, his frantic footsteps echoing in the hall, a symbolic sound. He wasn't fleeing Leavitt, he was fleeing the truth. Outside the Capitol, the crowd grew, spanning races and classes. Some waved flags, others held simple signs. "Thank you, Karoline." A woman, Maria from Idaho, lifted her young child toward a large screen displaying Leavitt's image, whispering, "She's why you can have a better future." For the first time in ages, America cried together, not from pain, but from a quiet statement that had shaken the nation. In a small Georgia town's ER, Nurse Sophia Lee stood by an elderly patient's bed, IV drip in hand. The TV in the corner was muted until she saw Leavitt's face. She turned up the volume just as the moment Leavitt presented the red folder replayed, followed by Schiff's collapse and the room's silence. Sophia sat on the bed's edge, trembling. Her brother had lost everything in the pandemic. His relief application denied because funds ran dry. Now she knew where some of that money went. The elderly patient, voice frail, whispered, "That girl, she's speaking for us." Sophia nodded, tears streaming, not from anger, but relief. In a room of beeping machines, hope crept through the TV screen. She texted her sister one word, "Watch." Leavitt hung up after President Trump's call, sitting down, feeling the immense weight of a nation's pain on her shoulders. "If they matter, if the truth matters," she whispered to herself. Trump had paused, then said, "America needed a moment, and you delivered it." She didn't feel powerful. She felt heavy, but ready. Because for the first time in years, someone stood where no one dared. Across America, something rare was happening. People didn't just watch, they felt. In a Louisiana diner, an older man named Henry stood from his seat whispering, "That girl Karoline has the soul of a justice warrior." In an Oregon farm, a family rarely aligned on politics gathered around a laptop, silently crying. In schools, teachers paused lessons to discuss truth and courage. At truck stops, factory floors, living rooms and churches, Leavitt's words echoed, "Senator Schiff, you can mock my youth, but your name is in a federal investigation report regarding $12 million in misused COVID relief funds." It wasn't just about Schiff anymore. It was about every forgotten American. Working mothers, veterans, teens fearing the world had no place for them. Leavitt remained in her office, hands clasped tightly, silent. A janitor, Mr. Thomas, passed by, stopped and greeted her. She stood, shaking his hand. "Thank you," she said. "No," he replied, his eyes misty. "Thank you for making us feel human." That night, as cities lit up with headlines and hashtags, America began to believe in itself again. Washington settled into a fragile quiet. Another envelope appeared at Leavitt's office. No stamp, no address, just her name, handwritten in blue ink. She opened it slowly. Inside was a photo of a young soldier, James, in uniform, holding a baby. The letter, written in shaky handwriting, read, "Miss Leavitt, my husband died waiting for aid. Your opponent blocked it. He served with honor, but our paperwork was lost. Then I learned millions went to shell companies. Today, watching you speak, I felt seen for the first time. You gave my husband dignity even though he's gone. Please don't stop." Leavitt placed the letter on her desk, as if it were sacred. She looked at the soldier's face, standing still, angry but resolute. This was no longer politics. It was about what we owe those who sacrificed everything. She wouldn't let them be forgotten again. Outside the Capitol, the crowd grew, not shouting, just present. Among them was Ethan, a 10-year-old in a wheelchair, a cancer survivor from rural Nevada. His mother had brought him there. Ethan had written a letter for Leavitt, but couldn't deliver it in person, so he quietly held a sign. "My hospital almost closed. Thank you for fighting." A news camera captured him. The clip went viral nationwide. By morning, all of America knew Ethan's name. In her office, an aide reported, "Ma'am, there's a boy out there with a sign. It's going viral." Leavitt paused. "What's his name?" "Ethan." She stood. Minutes later, she stepped outside, past security barriers, no speech, no stage. She found Ethan, knelt down, and looked him in the eyes. "You're why I stand up," she said. "You're the real warrior." Ethan smiled, his eyes shining. "You didn't yell," he said. "You just told the truth." Leavitt hugged him gently but firmly, then stood, gazing at the Capitol dome. "I didn't come here to win," she whispered. "I came to serve." Those words weren't politics. They were pure, true. In less than a day, everything had changed. Leavitt returned to Virginia that night. No parade, no spotlight, just family and quiet. She sat on the porch, a soft breeze blowing, staring at the stars. A knock came at the door. Sarah, the widow, stood there with her son, Noah. "I had to thank you in person," Sarah said. Leavitt shook her head, deeply moved. "I didn't do much." Sarah placed a hand on hers. "You gave a broken country a voice." Noah looked up. "You made my mom believe again." At that, Leavitt couldn't hold back her tears. This story of courage and conviction reminds us that even one voice speaking truth can ignite a nation. If Karoline Leavitt's unwavering resolve inspires you, please like this video, share it with those who need to hear this message of hope, and comment below with your thoughts. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more stories of integrity and impact that truly matter.